This is where it all began. The ocean was a pristine environment that sustained 70% of the world's biodiversity. The fish population was high, and a mere 50 years before now, the marine life in the ocean was far more prolific. And the average growth limit was nearly 3 times what it is today. Coral reefs provided homes to a nearly infinite number of ocean-dwelling organisms. They thrived in the clean water and balanced environment. As pH, or acid levels, began to increase in the ocean, life started to deteriorate. The ocean was clean, but it would not stay that way for long. The damage built up and began to harm the animals living in the water. The rapid increase in acidity, along with marine life's inability to adapt, resulted in fish being reduced in size, and they could no longer maintain the massive schools that the ocean had experienced in the past. During and after the Great Industrial Revolution, the CO2 levels in both the atmosphere and the world's seas spiked. Fish and other creatures of the deep began to die off and suffer from a number of issues presented by new technology and human resources. This led to the downfall of the many biodiverse regions of the ocean floor. Soon the ocean would come to fall by the hand of humankind. After a century of abuse, the ocean broke down. Signs of death began to show in the more vulnerable creatures of the sea, such as oysters, microorganisms, coral, and fish. Since the beginning of the industrial era, the ocean has absorbed some 525 billion tons of CO2 from the atmosphere, presently around 22 million tons per day. By the early 21st century, CO2 levels have hit an all-time high. pH levels are at a historic low, which means more acid in the oceans and marine life. Extinction rates are skyrocketing. To add insult to injury, the BP oil spill of 2010 dumped 200 million gallons of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. Oil spills are dangerous to marine life in several ways. The oil spilled in the ocean could get into the gills and on the feathers of marine animals, which makes it difficult for them to move or fly properly or to feed their children. Right now, there is only 10% of large ocean fish left from the pre-industrial revolution times. The long-term effect on marine life can include cancer, failure in the reproductive system, behavioral changes, and even death. Animals from impacted food chains are then eaten by humans, which affects their health as toxins from these contaminated animals gets deposited into the tissues of people and can lead to cancer, birth defects, or long-term health problems. In the modern world, both nature and humans are negatively affected by the excessive use of chemicals and factories. They pollute the water we drink and the food we eat. Now, imagine the cycle continues, unbroken for decades to come. When the next century comes around, our children will know Nemo as only fantasy. Predictions have projected that we may lower the ocean's pH by 0.1 units. That means 332.5 million cubic miles has been imbalanced by a single species, humans. A cubic mile of water equals more than 1.1 trillion gallons of water. If we had only 10% of natural large fish in 2014, it will undoubtedly get worse, and as the years fly by, it's possible to have a mere 1% by the 22nd century. By 2048, all of the world's fisheries will have collapsed, and we will have no fish left in the world to eat. Now, that may not sound like a big deal to those of you who don't like to eat fish, but fish sustain the ocean's ecosystem more than you might think. Fish eat plankton, but when plankton die and are not eaten by fish, their bodies float around in the ocean and sink to the ocean floor and decompose. The decomposing plankton bodies then turn into acid, lowering the pH levels of the water more than the water is already contaminated by acid. It is somewhat of a domino effect. However, this can all be avoided. By taking action in the present day, we can drastically change the future. Our oceans don't need to die for us to learn how to change. Starting now in our homes and our communities, we can work outward and eventually teach the importance of the ocean to the children of the future. We don't want to be going out and looking at the view of an acid bath and a giant pool of poisonous liquid. We don't want our children and the next generation to be growing up playing in that. By making a change, we can stop that all from happening.